Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Runners Roundtable, where today I'm joined by Christina Hetzel. I am so excited to have you here, as a few days ago, I spoke to Shelby, and you two are the masterminds behind Time for Brunch. And I love that you two work together. And she even said it, that there is this such a nice thing when the two of you can come together and really talk about coaching. I'm sure both of your athletes benefit so much, but even beyond that, I just love when women empower other women and when women work together in a way that promotes collaboration. I don't even know. I feel like we get so stuck, particularly as women, in this mindset of seeing each other as competition. And I feel like you and Shelby have totally flipped that on its head, and you're showing us what's possible. So before we get to how that even came together, can you tell us your running story?
Yeah, absolutely. Like many runners, or at least many runners that I work with anyway, I was the most unathletic child in the entire world. The only marathons that I was running was book marathons because I was a book nerd. So I would read and read and read. And I even knew how to forge my parents' signature so I could get out of gym class. Hi, mom. Hi, dad. But it's true. They know it now. And then actually, I am a bit different, I guess, in that being Hispanic or being Latina, we are traditionally more family focused. I won't say more family focused, but the role of taking care of my parents was pretty much something that I knew that was going to be very integral of my life as I grew up. It just happened a little bit sooner because my father had a debilitating stroke when I was about 30. And that just flipped my life completely around in terms of being thrust into a caregiving role much sooner than I expected to. And not to mention that prior to that, he was my best friend. So he was left without the capacity of speaking. And this was somebody who I went to a lot as a mentor in different roles of my life of how do I do this or how do I venture this? So I was incredibly sad and forlorn and a little bit anxious. And of course, also worried about like, what does this mean for my health markers? And am I potentially at a risk? So I started walking, and walking became jogging. And then it was like, can I make it to this next lamppost, or can I make it to this next mailbox? And then officially started running. And then I feel like it helped me rewrite my narrative and rewrite my story completely.
I am so big on storytelling. That is something that's so important to me. It's always understanding what are the stories we're telling ourselves, who are the main characters, who are the repeating characters, and what are the words that we're using. So I love that through running, this was a way for you to rewrite your story. How did that happen for you? Because I know it's not like you start running and everything magically changes. Running is wonderful, but it is not, uh, you know, 1, 2, 3, done, and you're
Yeah.
transformed.
Yeah. It's the capabilities that you see within yourself that's the magical part. And that's the rewriting of my story. So
Mm.
prior to running, prior to like consistently training, I felt like I was the kind of girl who really relied more on my intellect. But when it came to anything that was much more difficult in life, in general, even intellectual things, I would throw in the towel a lot because if it didn't come easy to me, then there was really no purpose of me sticking around. I assumed that the best way to not fail was to just excel at certain things. And if it was difficult, then I would just chuck it. Like, clearly, I'm not meant to do this. Running does not come naturally for me. It is like one of the most difficult things to this day. I always say that I am definitely not built for running necessarily, except that we all know that all body shapes are built for running. I know that now, but when I was first starting, I definitely did not necessarily agree with that or see that possibility yet. So what running did in helping me rewrite my story is I was able to rewrite that I don't have to quit on myself when things get hard,
Mm.
that I can prioritize myself, because prior to that, I often put myself on the back burner to everybody else's needs. So I learned a lot of boundaries in that. And I know it sounds very simplistic, like how do you learn boundaries with a run? But essentially it's, I need to get in my run. So if that is something that maybe seems I'm going to use the word that I think it's a dirty word to say about women, selfish, because a lot of us are seen as like, we have to put others first, and caregiving for children or caregiving for parents or family, or being there for being the best friend ever and being there no matter what. So running gave me the capacity to say, no, I don't have bandwidth for that right now. I need to get out for my run. And then maybe when I get back, I can open up the opportunity to be there in the capacity that you may need. So a lot of things were learned throughout the journey. And of course, like you said, it's not overnight. It is a continual process, and it's not solitary. It doesn't stand alone. It's this in conjunction with other things. So I utilize a lot of tools, I think, at this point to kind of help me completely move forward as I continue to evolve. Because isn't that the name of the game? We continue to evolve and hopefully level up a little bit.
Yeah. And I love that the concept of selfishness is so interesting to me. And I think back to myself when I started running. I started running when my children were very young. And it's like the other side of that selfish coin is guilt, the guilt of taking the time. And I remember that being something that was so present for me. I felt so guilty leaving. I felt guilty in a similar fashion in trusting other people to care for the people that I normally care for. And it definitely took a while. And I think back to my very first half marathon, and I've shared this story a little bit before, where at mile 7.5, I hit the wall, and I hit it hard. All I thought about, and once we hit the wall, the brain kind of spirals into, can I just sit here? Can I just wait? Maybe I should just wait for the van to pick me up. Like those were the thoughts that were coming through my mind of, not necessarily I'm not good enough, but I'm not strong enough to keep going.
Yeah.
Then I started doing the calculations of how long would it take for the van to come pick me up. And I figured if I walk the next 5.5 miles, I'll probably finish a lot quicker than if I wait for the van. So that's what I did. I just started to walk. So I spent the next 1.5 miles walking. And in that walking, I kept thinking about my family and my children. And I'm like, wait, even though I'm the one that's here, they sacrificed their Saturday mornings for me to be here. They sacrificed this. Like, they're as invested in that. And it was so interesting now, especially after hearing what you said and looking back for myself, where it's like, yeah, part of that is true. Like, part of that is true. But at the same time, if it would have been my husband doing that, no one would have said anything. Like, I'm sure he wouldn't have had that same level of guilt, that same like motivation to finish, because I felt like I had to come home and show everyone my medal and be like, look, this, your sacrifice, I did it. I did it. Because I was so, without realizing it again at the time, and I'm sure it's the same for you, without realizing how much guilt we carry over doing something that we perceive as selfish. And it's like, now we know, at least now I know, I'm like, it's not selfish. It's, this is what I have to do. I have to fill my cup before I start pouring out to everyone else. But it's so interesting how running, and I try to say this as well, it's like running isn't just the physical act of running. There is so much more that goes into running. And there is such a transformation that takes place within yourself as you run. So I love that that's part of your story. And I'm sure that's something that comes into your coaching as well, right?
Absolutely. So I want to say right now to all of your male runner listeners, we love you guys. Don't get us wrong. We know that there's a lot of differences in everybody's life, and not saying that we hold the cards of being the only caregivers all the way around. But primarily, I see more often than not when I work with my athletes and my clients, it's rare for the men to not prioritize their runs, while the women tend to have to tune into their work, their friends, their children, parents, their spouse, and they prioritize those things usually before they do themselves. So yes, it does very much come into my conversations with them where it's not selfish. This is something that's important to them to do for themselves, to feel that sense of accomplishment. I think it's beautiful that you did feel a need to kind of prove to everybody that it was worth their sacrifice. Because yes, I do believe anybody in our circle does tend to sacrifice things for us. But I also think it's beautiful that it allows us to kind of transform our way of looking at it, where it's like, it, yes, we do need things from others. Clearly, anything that you do successfully has to require that sacrifice from others, but it pays back to the family in spades. I mean, I can only imagine how great your children, of an example you're setting for them, that mommy may be really busy, but she still finds a way to self-care. And this is important for as they get older. So that's something that's so important for me. It's like, remember your children are watching, remember family members are watching. It could be adults that you're helping to change their lives.
Yeah, I think of that too, of I feel like I hear it from my mother-in-law, like I've heard it before. And very similarly, like Latina as well here, where the emphasis is very much on the family. And I feel like I've gotten messages from my mother-in-law of how brave I am to do these things on my own. And it's like, wait, what? I'm just like going to like I've gone to states by myself to run races. And I'm just thinking like, oh, I'm just doing what I love to do. I'm running it and I get time to do it without my kids and my family, without all of that. And yet in the culture, it's kind of weird. And this is something I still remember so vividly. My husband and I this year will celebrate our 16th wedding anniversary. And I remember at the beginning of our marriage, my mother-in-law making a comment of how weird it would be, or how weird it is when couples vacation separately. And I remember hearing that comment and thinking, oh, yeah, like I like to vacation with my husband, but I also really like to go on vacations by myself. Like I like to do things by myself. So there's definitely that cultural difference, which again, I think it, even saying what you had said about like, hey, men, we know you're listening and we know you have certain pressures and certain expectations, but there's definitely, in my personal experience, a different expectation that's been placed on me to be there for the family, to be there for the kids. And it's as simple as, oh, if Steph's going to run, who's watching the kids? And it's like, no one's watching the kids. They're just spending time with their dad. There is no watching. It's just being with the other parent.
Or who's making the dinner? Like how could you possibly go out to run before the dinner's been made for your family? I got that a lot from my mom. Like, pero Cristina, you like why are you not making your dinner for your husband? And so it was definitely culturally very difficult for us to kind of wrap their minds around originally.
Yeah, which is really interesting. How did you get into run coaching then?
Ooh, okay. So after tackling the London Marathon, because I'm on a quest to finish the World Marathon Majors, I came back and promptly dropped a metal disc on my foot that sidelined me. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to come to this from a place of gratitude. Luckily, I was able to finish London. This happened afterwards. I don't have any big races on the horizon. But of course, entering into that, what am I going to do? That was my first time actually not having running once I had come to running. So it sidelined me for about 8 weeks. And in that time, I decided I'm just going to really honor learning more about running. Why not? If I can't do it, I may as well just take everything in. So I did a lot of journaling. I did a lot of reading. I did a lot of researching. And it just so happened that there was this certification class that kind of came up around the same time. So I went ahead and I remember discussing it with my other half. And then the next day I checked back in and they had one seat left. And I was like, okay, I have to do it now. So I'm just going to do it and sign up. And I even remember walking into the class for the certification class and still not being fully recovered, like kind of wasn't in a boot anymore, but definitely wasn't still able to go out for a full on run. Why did I do it was because I think truly seeing that running had changed my life so much. And I'm sure you experienced this too. You were probably casually already coaching some of the people in your circle and encouraging some of the people in your circle and probably even hearing from them, oh, you should just coach me, or can you just write this out for me? And you're like, well, maybe I actually should have a certification and learn more about it. So that's basically how it came to be. And I haven't looked back. Like I just fell madly in love with every aspect run books than I probably should have, and taken a lot of information. But it's also fascinating to bring in our own experiences and combining it with our coaching, because again, it is so much more than just writing a training plan to get somebody to that finish line. It's really being there to kind of hold space for them through some of the ups and downs that come along that are inevitable with life and training.
Yeah. Talk about, I always love going down the rabbit hole of the mental side of running, and the fact that being a runner means more than physically running. So I just want to celebrate you for having this injury. And instead of sulking about it, you figured out a way to explore a different aspect of your runner identity by doing the run coaching. Because I feel like a lot of people, and I mean, that happened to me early on where I had IT band. And I mean, this was very, very early on. I don't think I had even been running 6 months at that point. And I just moped. I mean, I found yoga during that time, but I just moped about not being able to run. And I feel like you could have gone down that path of moping, not being able to run. And instead, you said, let's explore this other aspect of running. So I just want to celebrate you for making that choice.
Well, before I get a round of applause, let's make sure that we understand that there was a lot of moping involved, hence the journaling. Yeah. There was a lot of like, dear diary, today is great because I can't run. It's just, there was a lot of that mental component because the amount of endorphins that our brains release when we go running, it is hard to capture through a lot of other types of movement. Let's be honest, like aqua jogging, I know is something that I recommend a lot for my athletes when they're sidelined, but I'll be the first to say it's not going to feel the same. And you're not going to walk away from that pool thinking, oh, talked about the mental component of being injured. So that helped a lot too.
Yeah. And that's part of the amazing part, or that's just one of the aspects that's so amazing about being a runner, is that there are nuances to it and there's different levels to it. And yeah, again, I just say it because it's when I couldn't run for 6 weeks, and I don't even think I journaled. I think I just moped about it. But it's the whole, like, you moped about it, right? And I'm a big fan of give yourself time to have your pity party, like have your moment where you feel disappointed, you feel frustrated, but then take action. So again, it's more just like that's the action that you took and how the stars aligned for you to take that action. That's wonderful. And I do agree with you that for me, when I did the run coaching certification, it was a lot of people were asking me questions and I just wanted to learn more. I like to learn. So even before I did the run coaching, I had a bunch of books. I come from a very, and I think this is what I got from what you said, where I come from a very embodied place. So I do use a lot of my experience in the people I work with. Not so much to say, hey, this is my experience, this will be your experience, but to be like, this is an experience, this is something that we can kind of reflect upon just in case similar feelings start to come up, because running is really vast and the experiences we can have throughout running are really vast as well. But we've all, in our own ways, we've experienced runs that have felt good, runs that have felt bad, runs that have felt challenging, race experiences that were wonderful, race experiences that were challenging. So I like to bring in that. So I have all these books because I've tried different training plans prior to when I started working with the coach. And even then, working with the coach, particularly over the long term, you see that the approach or the training plan for each cycle does change. And that's, I think, such a big benefit of having a run coach, is that the run coach will meet you where you are in whatever stage of life you're in and coach you to that. People who are interested in working with you, do they reach out to you via the website? How are they getting in contact with you? And what does that initial conversation between you and a potential athlete look like?
So just as you as you experienced, and I want to take it back real quick, that yes, do you not love when you have that opportunity to work with an athlete for some time and you're able to see them through different courses of their life? I love that. Like, it's just so fabulous. And it also, when you have that opportunity to kind of start to see where you have to pull them back a little bit and where you have to kind of push them forward, it is such a beautiful relationship to be able to develop. So there's a lot of beauty in that coaching space. Yes, the website's the best place for folks to reach me. As you mentioned earlier on, Coach Shelby and I met and we joined forces. And so it's a beautiful space for us to be able to, while you would have one of us as your primary coach, there's always that really big, beautiful space of there's a second coach on the sidelines that can kind of peek over, give a different perspective if need be, look over the plan just to make sure. So I love that aspect of being collaborative and working with her. And the first appointment is always very, very holistic. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to get a little hippie and crunchy here, and that can maybe turn some people off. But I think it would be very unfair to approach coaching, or at least the way that I approach coaching, with just the metrics and just talking about, this is where I'm currently running, this is how many miles I run. So I like to know as much as I possibly can. Like, what does your household look like? What are the demands that you have on your time outside of work and home and running? What other ways do you fill your cup? What makes you happy? What gives you joy? And I know that sounds a little silly sometimes when you hear it, but it can help me to really be the best coach for you in terms of whenever we're working together. I know, oh, she loves dancing. So she loves dancing. Let's cross train with dancing. We don't have to do a traditional get on a spin bike or do the elliptical. There's other ways that we can bring your joy of movement into your running journey.
How do you determine whether someone's a good fit for you or not? And whether you're a good fit for them?
Great question. I am very collaborative with my athletes. So I will be honest. If someone wants a coach that's going to say, you do as I say, not and don't question it, I'm not going to be the coach for them. And I do value that there are people who do prefer that style of coaching and it works really great for them. And I think that's absolutely awesome. And I can definitely refer them to coaches that they can help them meet their goals and has more of that style. It's just not my style. I want to make sure that we understand that I'm going to ask questions along the way. How did that feel? How do you feel today versus yesterday regarding that workout? And just have a really good collaboration. Now, that doesn't mean that there will be times where I will program something that you absolutely hate. It's just a reality. I mean, unfortunately, we have to tackle the hard things and sometimes the things that we don't like. But that doesn't also mean that we can't have a conversation about it. And I can give you a little bit more of an information as to why are we programming this? It's not just because I decided to be mean today. There's obviously, there's a reason behind it, and helping people to maybe understand the components behind this particular type of training so that they may feel a little bit more prepared to tackle it.
I love that because I'm such a huge advocate of understanding context. I say context is queen, and we do have to know what's going on in a person's life, even something I think of the long run. And whenever I give examples, I always give examples based on the marathon, longer distances, not because I'm trying to elevate those distances, but because it seems like the biggest exaggeration in order to give the example I want to give. But it's like the long run is a perfect example of that, of when you're in marathon training, that is an incredibly valid question to ask someone. Hey, do you have 3 hours on the weekend to dedicate to a run? You do? Cool. Who's going to watch the kids? How are you resting? Like if I have 3 hours on the weekend to do a long run, it's because of everything else in my life is able to either pause or continue on without me while I'm doing that. So that's where, again, another benefit I find to having a coach, and I'm going to assume you agree with me, is that you do take the life into context. You do understand that your training plan and your metrics, okay, all that stuff, that gives you information. But if it doesn't fit with your life, it doesn't fit and it doesn't make sense. And for someone who, and I love that you said that you're looking for the ways to bring joy into the movement that they're doing. And in order to have joy, I feel, or this is where I'm exploring joy for myself. Joy is Joy is my word. I'm actually training for the London Marathon this year, and I picked a word to encompass how I wanted to feel in this training cycle, and it's joy. And it is very much so. How can I bring joy to every single run, regardless of how challenging it is or how quote unquote easy it is? So I just love that you do ask those questions. And I also want to know, how did you get to the point where you could confidently say, if this is what you want, I'm not the coach for you?
Oh, goodness. That's a great question. Can I first say, I'm so excited for you. You chose the most beautiful word for the most perfect marathon. London was literally, I
Mm,
think that I smiled from the minute I went to the
mm.
expo until I was like on the plane trip back. It was just absolutely amazing. So much fun, a lot of joy. So fantastic. I wish you well. I wish you well. Can't
Thank
wait to
you.
hear
Thank
and
you.
follow your journey.
Thank you.
So I think it goes back to our seasons of our lives, right? And I think that that's something important to make out. If you're not in the right season, it doesn't mean you're not capable of it. It doesn't mean that I believe everyone's capable of doing a marathon or an ultra or a 10K or a 5K. It just may not be the right season. So if that individual feels that they need to push forward, and I'm seeing and I'm assessing from my coaching abilities that it's right now you're telling me that you're maybe going to school full time, maybe you're studying for law school and you are also working and you have kids. I don't think this may be the right season. I just will be very honest with how it may be an unrealistic expectation to move forward with that. And then I don't want to necessarily cause any disappointment. But then again, of course, there is the fact that maybe there's another coach that may feel differently and can help them with that goal. I think it comes with time, right? I think that maybe when I was younger, it would have been hard to say, I'm not the right person for whatever. Insert whatever here. Like you just want to make sure that you're the right person for all the things. But I think as you get older and you mature, you realize that it's nothing necessarily against your expertise or your knowledge base or even who you are as a person. It just could be that it's not a right fit. I think of Dita Von Teese has this perfect quote where you could be the
Mm.
sweetest, juiciest peach and there's still going to be people who don't like a peach. So it is what it is. I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea and that's okay.
Oh my God, I love that you quoted her. That makes
I
me
know.
so happy that you quoted her.
It just shows the parallels of my knowledge base. I'll quote Ambi Burfa and Dita Von Teese. Yeah.
It just makes me so happy. Yeah, and I think that's such an important thing to consider. And I feel like oftentimes athletes, and I put myself in this camp as well, where we don't consider those things, right? We just consider the end thing that we want, and we don't realize everything else that needs to go into it. And that's where you, as a coach, come in and say, okay, well, this is what I'm seeing. And I feel like sometimes the athletes need to hear it reflected back to them in order for them to really understand it. So, in the case where I'll give you a situation and you just tell me how you would approach it. So, you have an athlete. Let's assume this is an athlete that you do have some rapport with, that you have been coaching them. So, you feel comfortable in your relationship with them. And they're telling you, Coach, I want to do this marathon. I really, really want to do this marathon. And the more you know enough about their life, you know kind of some of the stuff that's happening, you know that they are entering a particularly busy time in their life. They've told you, even I feel like sometimes the coaches, and it's like, even for myself, I feel like I'm a little more aware of the words that I say to my coach, right? Like if you have your athlete and they're like, I'm just tired, this run was really hard, the workouts were hard, and you realize, okay, this is not the season to be doing this particular race. The recovery's not there, the nutrition's not there, the life stressors are higher than normal. How do you have that conversation with the athlete and get them to not necessarily change their mind, but at least consider your words? Because I find that as well, us runners can be very, very stubborn.
Yes. I mean, talk about a sport that teaches stubbornness and rewards stubbornness, right? Anytime that you're able to convince your brain to keep moving forward when everything is screaming stop, So
Yeah.
I think that we train ourselves into a certain amount of stubbornness. There's no doubt about it. So I actually have had that situation, for the record. And it was a beautiful, beautiful relationship. She was a wonderful athlete and I wish her well. But unfortunately, we did end our coaching professional relationship because I continue to see that there were many situations where she was trying to push through for this particular season of her life that was slightly difficult because she had a special needs child. She was up at the hospital several times a week with the child. So missing a lot of runs and then trying to make up a lot of those runs in consecutive space, going out for long runs without having that good base foundation. So it was very concerning that there was an injury in the wings waiting. So I had the conversation. This is probably not the best time. It's not you. Your body's capable of it. It's just that this season in your life right now, it's unfair to put yourself through this. And I know how exciting it can be, right? Like you're signing up for London. I'm sure that if your coach was to call you right now and be like, I'm seeing that you got too much on your plate, girl. And you're like, what are you talking about? How hard it isn't to get to London. I'm going to do it. So I get that aspect of it, but also understanding that I can't help you potentially put yourself in a place of injury and seeing how much more that can set you back. So it is very difficult and it is very hard. And there is a lot of wrestling within ourselves as to how do you help that individual meet their goal, but also make sure that they actually, because for me, we're doing this for the long run, right? So London's great. Chicago's fantastic. Any race that we endeavor to do is phenomenal, but I want to make sure that you're still able to do this at 65 if you so choose to please to, or that you're able to be 82 and go out for a good strong walk because your body hasn't suffered severe injuries because of overtraining when you were younger. So that's really what's important to me, is to keep that really long shot approach of what are we looking for in the future.
And I think that even that approach is so helpful. And I'm going to, again, I'm going to assume that part of the conversation you have with your athletes when you're understanding the context is even sharing that, hey, my perspective here is that even though we're training for this particular race or this particular whatever, that we're going to train for life. And I feel like that's something that we don't, again, we kind of miss that when we think, oh, I have this big race on the horizon. I'm going to get a run coach for that. And we miss that part of what we get out of run coach is not just a training plan, but a training plan that is tailored to you so that you don't get injured along the way. It's not that it's like, and I think about it even now, just saying it out loud, where it's like, yes, you're working with a coach to get you to the start line. But when we look through all of that, it's your coach is giving you a training plan that is going to get you to that start line, hopefully healthy, injury-free, and as physically and mentally prepared as possible. And I feel like sometimes we have to have a discussion about that and state that very clearly, that I'm not just giving you a training plan. Yes, I'm programming these runs and I'm doing this and I'm programming maybe paces that I feel like you're capable of, but all of this as the coach. And again, I say this because the runner just sees, oh, this is the finish line that I want. Not so much when I zoom out, what's life beyond that finish line? What's life when we do look at these different seasons of running? And again, it's just like, I'm just so in awe because you recognize that this is a relationship that it's not going to work and not right now. And I love that you said that it's, as a coach, you can't support someone doing something that could potentially lead to injury. Because I think that highlights the fact that this is a relationship. The relationship between you and your athlete requires communication, trust. I feel like that's a big part too. Because yeah, if my coach were to say, I don't think you can do London, oh, that would hurt my heart. That would really hurt my heart. Yeah. But it would also probably lead to a very, very long, in-depth discussion as to why she believes that. And I feel like for me, at least at this point, if you tell me, Steph, we're pulling out of this so that you can run the next 5, 10 years, then okay, it sucks, but it's all right. How do we start to change that narrative for people where it's like this one race, one, it's not going to define you. And two, this one race comes back next year and next year and next year. So how do you think we can start breaking that thought process that a lot of us have that, well, if I don't do it this year, then I'm not going to do it, or it's not going to happen?
That's a beautiful question. Can you tell me exactly how so that I can make sure that I get it in my brain sometimes? Because it's almost you can see it so well when you're looking at other people as they're moving through their life. Like, okay, it's that race isn't worth it because you're not feeling that emotion, that you don't have that connection to that specific race. Because I think that if somebody was to tell me about Tokyo right now, I would be absolutely, actually, I was heartbroken when Tokyo was canceled due to COVID. And I mean, broken, like heartbroken. I had a full year of coming back to running because I felt like, yes, I felt so like the trust issues with running was 100% real there. But I think it does go back to reflection of this movement, this empowerment that we feel from running. Is this something that you do emphasize an appreciation in your life? And is this one race worth giving that up? Now, I am being slightly, I mean, I want to make sure that we understand that you can come back from injuries. Most runners have experienced injuries. It's not like I'm saying that one injury is going to take you out of the game forever and ever and ever. But I do see a lot of runners that train to the point of injury where consistently they're either training or they're recovering from injury, where they aren't able to actually level up that performance because they trained to the point of injury, which if they were to kind of maybe pull back a little bit, maybe give up on some of those races, they would see that they could actually consistently get to a better place in their running journey where they weren't necessarily worrying about recovery from injury quite as often. I think that's a tough one. That is a tough one. How do we actually get out of that? And the only way that I could think about it is just looking at the long term, as hard as that may be.
Yeah. And I feel like even for myself, I think how I would approach it for myself, not for anybody else, but even just thinking about how long I've been in this sport. And for me, it's been a decade of running and racing to the capacity that I do. And I feel like that's where maybe I would find the comfort of, oh, I have 10 years of experience to tell me that I can come back, or to tell me that that start line isn't going anywhere and that finish line will be there when I'm ready for it. But I think this is such an important question, even for us to ponder right now, because again, it highlights that coach athlete, it's not just a training plan. Like sometimes we do have to be the ones to have these hard conversations with our athletes. We do have to be the ones to figure out, does this make sense for you? Are you happy? Are you feeling okay? And I've shared this story as well for myself where few years ago, and I actually even found the journal. Like I have so many journals. I'm sure you have a ton of journals. I have a lot of journals. I save them all. I've started dating them so I can kind of know where they're at, like where I was in time. And there's this one journal that I found, and it is, oh my goodness, it's probably from like 2016, 2015. And it was when I was new to marathoning and I had just learned about the majors. And the irony is that I lived in Boston. I saw the marathon each year, but I had no clue what it was. I just thought it was a really cool day where everyone came out to run and people were supporting it. No clue about like you have to qualify for it. Nothing. So I'm looking at this journal. I'm kind of flipping through the pages, and in there I see I had mapped out the years and how, like, what the qualifying standard was and what I would have to improve each year, because back then I thought running was linear. Like I thought the progression of running was linear.
Yeah.
And I totally had like a 5-year plan for running marathons to get me to that Boston qualifying time. On paper, it was beautiful. actually having to live through training, live through marathon experiences that were difficult or did not go as planned, I started to get frustrated with the sport, for a lack of a better word, because I wasn't seeing the results I wanted to. And thankfully, at that point, I had started working with a coach. And I remember having a check in with my coach, talking about races. And she very bluntly asked me, why do you want this goal? Why do you want a Boston qualifying time? And let me tell you, that was a very powerful moment, because I realized that I wanted it to qualify myself as a runner. And
Mm-hmm.
because I saw so many other people doing it, I thought that's what I had to do to be like a legitimate runner. It blew my mind. And let me tell you, that day when I decided I'm not going to hold myself to this, the lightness that I felt, I think I even cried on that phone call with my coach. And it truly took someone from the outside that has that global perspective to ask that hard question. And I'm so thankful that she asked me that question. And I share this because it's not that I don't still have time goals. It's just that my relationship to those times has changed when I think about how long I want to be in this sport. And when I think about, and I'm sure you can agree with this, how deeply heartbreak in this sport is felt. So in a way, I feel like I proceed with running, not cautiously, but definitely very aware of how am I feeling, because the heartbreak is there, right? Like the heartbreak is right around another bad race, another bad run. Like we can experience it when our expectations get so high, and for whatever reason, the reality, there's just, the bigger the gap between reality and expectation, the more room for heartbreak. So yeah, I think it's just,
Girl, you're speaking to my heart. Like I'm actually starting to get teared up a little bit, because that's one of the things I love about running, right? You feel all of the emotions, that high that you feel, that beauty of being able to kind of run free and have a good training run or have a good training cycle or the finish line, whatever it may be. It's unparalleled. But just like everything that must come up must come down, it can also absolutely, you could feel at, unfortunately, your lowest, you could feel absolutely, maybe even betrayed by your body when your body
yep.
isn't capable of doing whatever it is that you think it is. I mean, when you look back, and this is where having a coach is completely wonderful as well, your coach will remind you, it's not that your body's betraying you. It's just, again, you haven't slept for it, or
Right.
you haven't been able to like actually have a real meal because you've been running around with work deadlines. And I think that we start to see that it's a very symbiotic relationship, our mind, our spirit, our soul with our body. And when it's not performing, it's not necessarily because of some weakness that we have within or any incapability that we have. It just could be the actual season of life and the circumstances around it. And I think it's great to have that perspective, that somebody can say it to you. It's not you. It's just, this is the time. And by that, I mean, this is the time where you have other challenges that you need to gain. Now, I think that where a lot of people also may see is like, well, then why bother with a coach? If I'm not in the season of my life to have that time, that's where actually I see that most of my athletes really, really, really tend to enjoy working with me the most, is because they do need that little reminder of, oh, I still need to make space for myself. I may not be training for a time qualifying goal right now, but I need that little text, that little reminder, that little message coming through the coaching platform saying, hey, have you taken time for yourself? Have you done the 30 minutes of yoga that we programmed today? Or have you gone out and done your 45-minute joy run, or even your harder sessions? Just anything to remind you that you are valuable, in the time that you need to take for yourself is also valuable. So I think that's, again, as you mentioned, it's such a beautiful relationship. And I'm sure you feel this way too. It's such an honor to have another human being entrust us with their journey, regardless of where they are on their journey. And it's something that I think that we take with great respect. I think I'm more cautious with how I plan and program and the conversations I have with my athletes than I ever would be probably for myself, just because it's something where we understand that you really do trust us and we in the long run.
Yeah, and I think about it too, where it's definitely there's I had one athlete where all the runs and the workouts were feeling based. Like, okay, this run, you're focusing on joy.
Oh,
Go
I
do
love
that.
that.
This
Yeah.
workout, you're focusing on happiness. Go
Yeah.
do that. And that was something that I even for me, it was kind of a challenge because I'm like, oh, I'm so used to like, you give the pace or you give something a little more concrete. Whereas here, that with that particular athlete new to running, and it was figuring out, okay, how do I get them to connect to running on
In
a
the field.
deeper
Mhm.
level beyond what the body can do? So I agree with you. And I find that it's often when I'm thinking about the people I work with, it is very much my intention is to approach it in such a way that hopefully they fall in love with the sport, whether it be with running or whether it be with yoga. It's okay, how can I deliver the information? How can I deliver the praise or the encouragement in a way that one, they start to take ownership about what they're doing, they feel empowered by what they're doing, and also they really start to love it beyond feeling accountable to anybody, beyond feeling like they need to check in with me. They really start to love it and they realize that, hey, this thing of running, while it is self care, it is now something that has become indispensable to me in my days in order for me to show up however I need to show up to everything that I need to do. So I just, again, I love coaches for that reason. And I think not even I think, I know that I am in full agreement with you that it is in those in between seasons. And I say in between seasons, just a season that's not focused on racing or
Mhm.
focused on anything. That truly is where one, you learn a lot about your athlete. And then two, your athlete learns a lot about themselves. And three, where the coach athlete relationship, that's where it really, really develops. Because yeah, if you can keep doing this without having that finish line as your end point, you're going to learn so much about yourself, about each other, and about your relationship to running and to each other.
Yeah, it's like dating. I mean, if you think about it from that perspective, it's like everything's nice and hunky dory at the very beginning, but once you actually get to know each other a little bit more, that's where the deep connection really comes into play. It's no longer superficial. It's not just because we're having fun necessarily. It's because I actually really get to know you. You really get to know me, and we're able to really move forward together, knowing that it's something that we're doing this for, a specific reason together. We're going to make sure that it happens and you're as healthy and happy as possible every step of the way.
Yeah. You mentioned collaboration being really important to you. What other characteristics would you feel define your coaching style?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. Collaboration is at the very top. Second of all, I would say very holistic. Absolutely. I've mentioned that. And I know we tend to think of holistic as being kind of esoteric,
Mm.
where I'm going to have you like chanting, or I actually probably will I will program meditations quite frequently, but not for necessarily every athlete. But I do believe in visualization, journaling, and all of those different aspects of contributing to really helping us with our running. And of course, strength training and the core training and all those different aspects, all the different things that help us be the best runner. But I think that, yes, very holistic in the approach of more often than not, you're not going to get just runs. Like you said, just a training plan that just has a run. We're actually going to look at all the different aspects of how to mitigate some of the stress in our life, so that when we go out for a run that does actually put stressors on our bodies, we're more prepared to handle that stress in a way that's healthy of a release for us. And I wouldn't necessarily call it nurturing. I would call it more encouraging. And by that meaning that I'm fully confident when I program something that that individual is capable of those things. And I believe that that may be like that little cherry on top of the sundae that really athletes need more than anything else, because you may have a lot of doubt, but it's good to know that there's somebody that has that's totally in your corner and has zero doubt that you're capable of it. And that can help you make tweaks when maybe those things aren't hit necessarily. So I think that those are probably the top three: is collaborative, encouraging, and holistic.
If you had to describe your coaching philosophy in one sentence, what would it be?
I want to make sure that you use the word, and it's a word that I use often as well, that everyone feels empowered, which is where the collaboration comes into play. So that if we choose to end our relationship tomorrow and you move forward in your space, that you still feel empowered, that you have more knowledge that you gained in our relationship together, because of, explaining the different things, or that you feel empowered to even ask or to question the things that for you from me or any other coach. At no point do I think that the coach should be elevated to an individual where they're put on a pedestal. So I want the individual to feel like an equal and feel empowered. So my coaching philosophy is to leave the individual feeling more empowered and more in control of how they move through the space of the world. And obviously a lot of joy, because I like sparkle and joy too. But yeah, feeling empowered to do so.
I so appreciate that you just said that, because that is something that I feel like has not been directly stated in all of these conversations that I've had, where the coach athlete relationship, it's not hierarchical. Like, it's not. Yes, your coach may know more things than you do on a technical basis, but athlete, you know your body the best.
Amen.
So it's both of you kind of coming together to communicate that, because yes, you as a coach, you're going to give workouts that are challenging, but it's workouts that you believe your athlete is capable to do. Athlete needs to come up and be like, all right, coach says I can do it. I'm going to try it and I'm going to figure it out. And either you nail the workout, you don't, but then you have a conversation about it to be like, okay, so what happened? And that's one of the things that I've talked about often, where it's like our idea of failure with workouts is really interesting, because it's like, okay, let's talk about what you mean by failure, right? And the one that I see happen often is that, oh, I failed because I didn't hit my paces. And it's like, okay, but let's talk about the context. Was it a hotter day? Was it this? Okay, you didn't hit your paces, but let's look at the different intervals. And are all the intervals in the same range? Then you did a great job. Maybe you didn't hit the very specific thing.
Yeah. And seeing
Go
all the
ahead.
other metrics, if for the people that are because let's be honest, there are folks that are athletes that are very metric focused. You could tell them,
Yep.
did you feel good? And they don't care if they feel good. They want to see it on black and white. So helping
Yep.
them to see other metrics. Okay, so maybe the paces weren't there, but your cadence is often popping from when we first started working together, or your heart rate, you're starting to lower your heart rate, or there's such a myriad of ways to see that there is advances and metrics outside of just the pacing world that you can actually kind of put more attention on, that I think is really important. It's such a beautiful space, truly, to be able to see all those different aspects of moving forward in your journey, and how each season can kind of apply to that. There could be a season where you just focus on heart rate training, or just focusing on your form and cadence. So it's also very exciting.
Yeah. And that makes it really exciting for the coach as well. So anybody
Mhm.
that's listening to this and thinks, oh, my coach doesn't want to focus on heart rate or cadence or any of that. No, your coach actually does. Like, your
Yeah.
coach likes to geek out to those things as well. And even for myself as a coach, I see those things as like exciting challenges of, oh, okay, I'm going to have to approach this a little bit differently. How can I approach it in a way that, one, I'm learning, the person's learning about themselves, and we're seeing whatever improvements the athlete wants to see. So know that if you ever suggest something to your coach, that they're probably going to be really curious as to where you're coming from and probably eager to figure it out as well. I was wondering, how did you and Shelby come together and create time for brunch?
So I'm not sure how much she may have told you already. So I'm sorry if I'm going to repeat some of our history a little bit, but we met through an coaching app. And I think maybe within her first week of she joined in maybe a year after I had been with the company. I remember sending her a text, "Oh my God, I love you. We have to work together." We've got to somehow make it happen that outside, because we were independent contractors, outside of this job that we're doing, we stay in contact, we work together in some capacity. I see a lot of similarities between her and I, which makes it work, but we have a lot of differences, which also makes it work.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of what comes to be the most. But the app sunsetted, and they kind of gave us a week notice. And I remember thinking, kind of how you just discussed, like, as I mentioned, when I got injured, I'm very action focused, and that's not necessarily always good. Sometimes I do believe you need to allow yourself to feel the feelings a little bit more deeply.
Yeah.
But it's just not how I'm naturally programmed. So my initial thought was, okay, they're closing. How do we keep this going? Like, we have a community that we're serving. They're distraught. How do we keep this going? So I think I woke up on a Thursday morning and just walked on over to my computer setup and just recorded a podcast and decided this is how we'll do it. We'll move over what we were currently doing into the podcast format. And I reached out to Shelby and I said, "Shelby, how about we make this happen together?" And I remember being so nervous. I felt like I had just proposed and waiting to get the response. And then, like, 3 hours later of her going back and forth via text, because she's a younger generation than I am. So she's definitely more of a text person than a phone person. And after going back and forth like 3 hours later, I'm like, "So does this mean that you're saying yes?" And she's like, "Oh my God, yeah, I'm totally in." I'm like, I had no idea this entire time. So we sat down, and that's what calls and conferences, and deciding what is a space that looks like what is important for us both, because we want to make sure that it's something that, again, very collaborative, that she feels seen and heard, I feel seen and heard as to how we approach it. And it's been so fascinating to work with her and to see the differences, but yet see how we're able to continue to work really harmoniously for what I feel really benefits our mission. And our mission is really to make it where this sport, as you said, prior to us starting to chat officially recording, it's changing, and how people are being served is changing. And that's something that's very exciting to both her and I. We're very girl power-ish, but beyond that, we're also very much we want it to be a space that's welcoming, and a space that's welcoming for everyone, backgrounds, races, paces, sizes, abilities, whatever the case may be. We just want you to have more joy in your body. And if walking and running does that for you, then we are here to help that happen.
I love that. How did you get past, or did it even come up for you, this idea of competition with another coach or with another female coach? Because I find that not so much, I haven't really experienced it within the coaching sphere, but I've definitely experienced it within the yoga sphere of there's almost this closing off, and I don't want to say it's competitive, but it's definitely not as welcoming or as collaborative as I would like to see it. So was that something that ever came up for you? Did that even occur to you? Or was this just like, you know what? We work really well together. We want to keep this work going. Let's get together and let's do it.
I believe wholeheartedly that things are done best with others. And I think that proverb says, if you want to go faster, go alone, but if you want to go further, go together. And
Yeah.
I believe that actually could do both. Combining forces, you're able to really do the best work together. And anything that I've done in life successfully, anything that I have been successful at, I'm going to say has been because the best decision that I could always make was to be collaborative with others. Anytime that I've approached any project, collaborating with others is the make it or break it, because there will be different perspectives brought to the table. There will be different abilities brought to the table and strengths and weaknesses, but knowing that you're there to buoy each other through those weaknesses and learn from each other. So that didn't enter my mind. I feel like the only person that I tend to be competitive with is myself, and evidently at the finish line. That's like the only time that I see myself being like super duper competitive. I don't want anybody to block that finish line photo. So I'm like, this is my time to shine. I want to look great at that finish line.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, I've done it too, where I'm like assessing who's in the finish line,
Yeah.
like where I can kind of squeeze in so that it's just me and not
Right.
anybody else. Like I totally hear that. And I really appreciate your emphasis on collaboration, because that is something that, again, in the different spheres that I'm in, some areas are a little more collaborative than others. And I always have to say, there's enough people out there in the world. Those who will benefit from your teachings and your style of coaching will find you. And then the runner, the student that's for you, you'll find them. There are so many people here, and I really appreciate that your experience was that, because I feel like a lot of us, and I'll throw myself in there sometimes, are afraid to even make the ask of, hey, let's do this together, because we fear being rejected, or we fear that the other person is going to see us as competition. I know it's happened to me where I'm like, no, I genuinely just want to work with you. Like, I'm not trying to steal anything from you. I'm not trying to take anything from you. I just feel that if we work together, our impact will be greater. But it's
Oh,
hard.
without a doubt. So I think that for anybody who's rolling through this podcast right here and now, and regardless if they're a coach or they're a runner, if they think of it in any aspect of their life, I do want to encourage individuals to think of it from the sake of abundancy. Just as you said, there's enough people out there. There's enough pie to go around, and there's different flavors of pie. Not everybody's going to like, I think I'm a little bit of key lime meringue pie, and not everybody's going to dig that. And that's okay. Maybe somebody else wants apple. So come from a place of abundancy. There is enough. And I want to definitely ask people to kind of try to steer away from that scarcity mindset, because that's where I think I see a lot of people start to make decisions that ostracize them from really wonderful opportunities.
Absolutely. We stand in our own ways,
Mhm.
Okay, final question, and you've already alluded to it, so I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are, but how can we make running more accessible and inclusive?
That is a great question, because although we definitely want to make it more welcoming and inclusive, let's just say we still have work to do, right? And it's like, what is the next steps? I think in that space, it's continuing to do exactly what you're doing, which is to open up the platform to others to listen, to really actively listen and take forward what they bring to the table. So thankfully now, because of the beautiful mediums of podcasts and blogging and the internet, we're able to hear more people have a platform.
Yes.
So I guess I'm challenging people a little bit here that are listening, and not just having a sake of abundancy, but also to consider maybe hearing an opposing viewpoint that maybe isn't your own, and just listening and trying to take that to heart. Because even like if we talk about Boston, that can be such a polarizing subject. There's people who feel so strongly against charity runners. There's people who feel like charity runners are more than welcome and have space there. So I think that we need to have that conversation with people who don't necessarily see the same viewpoint as us, just so we can start to really make a big difference.
Yeah, I love that. And Boston is definitely very polarizing. I I didn't realize it until I had my own moments of confrontation with it. And every now and then I'm pretty mindful over who I follow on social media as well. It was a gift of the pandemic, where I had the time to kind of reflect on, who am I following? What are the messages? What are the messages? And I think that's pretty much it. Where for me now, if I come across an account that feels really elitist when it comes to running, it's like, okay, cool, I hear you. I'm not going to follow you, but I like that you're encouraging listen to the opposing view and try to understand it. And I find that with it's with running, it's such an interesting thing because we are so metric driven. And
Mhm.
I think of that saying, and I'm sure you've heard it, right? Like the 5-minute mile is the same as a 12-minute mile, like it's still a mile. And yet there's going to be different perceptions of who looks like they can run a 5-minute mile, who looks like they can run a 12-minute mile. And then even it was so wonderful because with one of the coaches, we talked about races, and races are supposed to be for everyone. And yet
They can be
races will start,
expensive.
yeah, they can get expensive. Or even when you're racing, they start breaking down the race
Yes.
before the
Oh,
final
for the
runners
back.
are
Yeah.
in. So
Mhm.
it's like one of those things where it's so important to hear the stories, to listen. And I've been saying this a lot, where a lot of the work lands on those of us who are already within the running space to create the space for new people. And even I love the idea of a platform. And I really appreciate you saying that, because there are times where I get really funky with social media and I don't want to share. And then I have to remind myself, oh no, you have to share so that people can see someone like you running, so that people
Mhm.
can see that right now in my season of life, I'm not running for paces, I'm running for feeling. And that's really healthy for people to see as well, that it doesn't have to be about paces, that your paces do not define you, they do not add value to you as a runner. That's a lot of my messaging right now. It's like, no, no, embrace where you are. Embrace where you are, because comparison is going to burn you out. It's going to kill your love for this sport. It's going to prevent you from doing what you need to do in order for you to excel as a runner. So I just love that, because I find that particular question is it's a very contextual context, but it's also a very layered one, because there's not one single answer. There's many answers that lead to more questions. Even something of hear more voices, it makes me wonder how can I hear more voices?
Yeah.
Where are these voices? What can I do to amplify those voices? Right? The voices are there, but it's how do we figure out where they are? So I really appreciate you sharing that, because there is a lot of work to do, but it begins with you and I having conversations, and then those conversations extending beyond you and I to our communities. And then it just it ripples, but it starts with asking the question and listening to the variety of answers.
Absolutely. And also, I think it comes into if you do approach the sport and you don't find it quite yet welcoming, it doesn't mean that it's not the sport that's right for you. It just means that those people in your nearest circle are not the right people for you. So continue pushing forward, continue moving into other spaces where there are positive, uplifting voices that are here to encourage you. So, again, love what you're doing with this mission. And it's just so wonderful that you're highlighting so many great people. So, thank you.
Oh, thank you. And that was just a mic drop. Okay. I'm not going to say anything else. Tell us where we can connect with you and how we can support you or cheer you on in whatever it is that you do next.
Well, friends, I'd love for you to come on over and join us with Time for Brunch. It's usually a long run structured workout on Saturdays, but we also have what we call as quick bites that drops on Wednesday, which is a light movement focused. And we have a gamut of conversations and guests as well. You can also find us at Time for Brunch Podcast on Instagram, where you'll usually find Shelby kicking butt and taking names over there on the social media side, or the website timeforbrunch.com.
Awesome. Any fun races or training updates for us?
Tokyo. This will cap that 10-year, 6-star journey if I'm able to make it happen and, COVID doesn't do its thing again.
Yeah, I feel for you. I have a friend who she's in the same boat. And Tokyo, she was supposed to do it, I believe it was in 2020. If you're listening, Sabrina, you can correct me, but it was the pandemic, and she as well experienced heartache every time it got canceled, because she's like, this is the last one. the last one. So we'll be cheering you on. I will be crossing my fingers, crossing my toes, praying to the running gods, the health gods, whatever it is I need to
Thank
do, that
you.
Tokyo happens and that you make it there safely, and that the rest of your training goes as smooth as it can.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. I do. We'll take all of the good vibes coming my way.
Yes. All right, everyone. We'll see you soon. Bye.